Delighted to welcome now on stage John Palmesino and Anne-Sophie Rönskirk, who actually established Territorial Agency, an independent organization that combines architecture, analysis, advocacy, and action for integrated spatial transformation of contemporary territory. So they're going to talk about transformation and urbanism. I wanted to say that with John Palmesino, that there is a rumor that John is Swiss. Katsuo Sejima, in an exhibition we did in 1999-2000 called Mutations, which we did with Rem Koolhaas, Stefano Boeri, and many others, Sam Quinto. Actually, Katsuo Sejima designed this exhibition for Tokyo, and she designed a wonderful white-on-white rumor, was a designed rumor, saying John Palmesino is Swiss. And that rumor became a real rumor in Tokyo, and a few weeks later, John Palmesino did move to Switzerland. He now lives in London, and he and Anne-Sophie Rönskirk do many amazing projects, transformative projects, including the Anthropocene Observatory, an international documentary project tracing the emerging thesis of the new man-made age, developed with Armin Linke and Anselm Franke, which was exhibited at HKW in Berlin. Also a project in collaboration with Greenpeace and DARE, the Museum of Infrastructural Unconscious North Unfinishable Marcomer. They teach at the AA, Architectural Association in London, and Territorial Agency will now be giving a talk on the spatial transformation of contemporary territories titled Transforming the Territories of the Anthropocene. Please give a very, very warm welcome to John Palmesino and Anne-Sophie Rönskirk.
Thank you very much, and I'll be on stage alone because Anne-Sophie is in the back with the best transformation we have, our little newborn son. Today, I'd like to discuss with you some possible conditions through which we are all undergoing, a vast reorganization of our planet, which the scientist Paul Crutzen named the Anthropocene. In a debate of the IGBP, he stood up and said that the entire organization of the science of the International Geosphere-Biosphere Program was to be reconceptualized, and no longer we are living in the long epoch, more than 11,000 years of after the melting of the ice, the stable conditions through which we built all our civilization, but we are entering the big reverberations of a completely new time, a new epoch of the history of our planet. And I thought that my understanding of what a marathon is represented by this fantastic little drawing by a wonderful architect, Konstantinos Doxiadis, but probably it's done by his behind-the-scene assistant, Jacqueline Turret. And you see on the upper side the organization of the forces shaping human settlements. And they go through multiple reverberations, split points, and then sometimes they come back together. And the lower part, it's the relationship between those splitting points, those moments of shift, and knowledge about what's going on. And of course, marathons like this one are in the present, trying to think the future, trying to bring new knowledge about what's going on. But the transformation that we have seen today is a transformation that is produced by knowledge. The more we know, the more we engineer, the more we architect, and the more we manage to transform the Earth to a point of irreversible condition. The carbon cycles, the nitrogen cycles, the entire system of the Earth is being modified. And the major modification is the fact that we can no longer keep the Earth system, the complex interrelation between the atmosphere, the geosphere, the biosphere, separate from the world systems, the systems that organize our lives, that people like Immanuel Wallerstein described so carefully. Today, the two that were split during modern times are back together, and that clash is reverberating much in our discussions. The major image that we all have about the Anthropocene is the hockey stick, the rise of Earth temperature. The second major unknown condition is the fact that we have business cycles, we have economical cycles that equally lock us in gigantic waves of change. The relationship between the two, man-made and nature, is now no longer tenable. One equals the other. The interesting element that I would like to discuss with you today is, on the contrary, a condition of stability, a condition of long-term and lock-in factors, not only large reverberations of the Anthropocene, but conditions through which modernity, and by that we mean mainly a Eurocentric Western idea of how we can deal with the world, is linked to an increase in usage of energy, of course carbon fossils on one side, but mainly it's linked with a stabilization of our activities, a stabilization of the architectures that deal with cohabitation. That's the total amount of energy used, and you see that since I'm born, we use more than double the energy, overall amount of energy. But what is interesting is the overall amount of energy in percentage. And what comes in a very striking way is that in this graph you see a number of waves. A wave that transforms the usage of coal into usage of atomics, taken on from the usage of wood. What is interesting is that we don't use multiple energy forces at the same time. We tend to deplete one energy source at a time, and then we move on. What is interesting is, of course, that the age of wood is followed by the age of coal, by the age of the atomic and the oil, and we're now probably entering a phase where we really have to clap and try to grasp the possibility of renewables. In terms of overall structure, overall percentage, the renewables is barely seen at the bottom of the graph, 0.0 percentage. What I'm interested in discussing with you today is the stability through which modernity has tried to manage those energy sources. The age of wood corresponds with a political organization of the city-states, small groups of people entering their relationship with, trying to harness, and by doing that, destroying large of their resources. So you start seeing a group of people coming together, destroying the countryside, flushing out the waters in order to create farmland, cutting the trees, and so on, moving on to nation-states in order to address more and more energy. The parliamentarian accounting system of the nation-state having to deal with coal systems and the possible reorganization of science as the means of organization of cohabitation, to move on into what we call the international, the large reorganization of atomic energy and oil that needed an overall new form of institutional condition. And this is, of course, entering now a tipping point in the Anthropocene, and probably you can call it a globalization. I'd like to call it cosmopolis, in reference, of course, to Isabel Stenger's notion of the cosmopolitical. So what I'm trying to describe with you today is architecture. An architecture that operates at levels of magnification that are much wider than the usually conceived of architecture. Buildings, fantastic spaces like the one inside we are today. But architecture as a relationship between the forms of cohabitation, the institutional forms of cohabitation, and the material forms that we then imprint on the flows and material processes and that are our base. The main form of architecture that we can imagine is, of course, linked to building farms, houses out of bricks. And bricks, of course, are the basic condition of a civilization based on in the Holocene. The Holocene is a melting of the ice, big rivers, sedimentation processes, stratification of clay, and out of the clay you take out the bricks. This is the Tigris River in the Mesopotamia. The Tigris River in the Mesopotamia, marked by kilns, marked by one of the longest inhabitation of the planet. a very complex system that moves from one civilization into the other, but the material basis is the same. It's the sedimentation process in which you have to synchronize your society, you have to build probably large hierarchy in order to maintain alarm systems, you have to build very complex systems of belief, and the kilns of the production of the very basic conditions of picking up the ground in order to make your home are today transformed into other plumes. Today, the plumes, the smokes that are marking the skies of the Mesopotamian system are those of airstrikes. This is an image taken in summer 2014. It's an airstrike. It's probably the second airstrike of the US on Syria. The structures of the Holocene, the river systems, are completely being transformed during our lifetimes by construction of dams, by construction of irrigation systems, exponentially growing. And today, the system like this one, Lake Assad in Syria, is becoming very quickly not only an element that used to be of the Holocene and now it's part of the Anthropocene, it's becoming a weapon. It's becoming a weapon by IS or by the regime of Assad in order to regulate a very complex environment. What is at stake is that the environment itself is becoming weaponized in the Anthropocene. The very quick analysis of the image that the Serpentine was so kind to put as the banner of the, on the website, of what has happened over the last 15 years in the Mesopotamian region. Basically, just before the beginning of the war in Iraq. What you see here is a multi-year analysis done by a territorial agency. In red, we've detected chlorophyll through complex satellite analysis, how it changes over time. And then it's a condition that has been adjusted so that we understand seasonal variation. And you start seeing that in bright red, there's more vegetation. In dark and brown red, you see less vegetation. And what is at stake is that the entire organization of the Holocene in the region is being modified dramatically. In white, you see the construction of the lakes. The red on red doesn't work. The Lake Assad and the different lakes. And this is one of the few borderlines, one of the few territorial conditions that we can see from space. In the upper side, you see the flourishing agriculture, irrigated by the Great Anatolian Project in Turkey. And in the lower part, you see the rise of more and more conditions of depletion of agriculture. What is at stake here, and I wanted to discuss this with you today, is that territories are being changed. Territories are being completely modified in the Anthropocene as a condition of maintaining what is at stake in our life. A territory is not land. The origin of territory is very similar to laboratory or observatory. It is the beginning part that is not land. Territory is linked to terere, to warn off, to ward off, and to scare you. It's a place, it's a region where you scare others off because what you want to preserve is your life. A territory today in the Anthropocene is being opened up on all sides. Territories are no longer contiguous. They are open on all sides. They're transformed through very complex systems of interrelations of culture and rearticulation of what we used to know as the corporations, the long roles of the colonial systems, and the rearticulation of large supply chains. The largest supply chains, of course, come from China. This is a satellite analysis of the transformation of the coast of China. That in blue here, you see everything that was built or transformed in the last 5 years. In green, you see everything that was there 10 years ago, and in red, something that was there 15 years ago. And suddenly you start seeing the complex system of change. It's no longer just expansion, it's abandonment, a reconfiguration, and complete taking over by new systems of production. What is at stake in the Anthropocene is the reconfiguration, a renegotiation of territories, a renegotiation of the complex systems of what keeps us alive. And this is no longer an issue only of land, it's an issue that takes over the entire surfaces and the atmosphere of the planet. In the supply chain, in the reorganization of activities of security, this is the conditions through which we get to have our shirts, our food. In red dots here you see pirates attack over the supply chain. The blue areas are the choke points of securization. And of course, what happens in this very complex set of transformations of the lifestyle of today is that what is at stake is that we are mobilizing humans as much as we are mobilizing the planet. Thank you.